Sorry. Do you mind just saying this?
哎，继续看我的 video，先喝两杯，先。
Perfect. Let's start today. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the AI Plus Battery Seminar Series. We are especially grateful to those joining us from different time zones, particularly our colleagues in China, where it's already quite late. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. This seminar series aims to bring together researchers from academia, national lab, and industry to explore how AI is transforming battery science and engineering. It's our great pleasure to have Dr. Vidushi Sharma with us today. Dr. Sharma is a staff research scientist at IBM Research, where she works at the intersection of artificial intelligence, material science, and first principle physics. Her recent work focuses on foundation models and generative AI for accelerating materials discovery. Today, Dr. Sharma will give a talk titled Mortise to Males, Foundation Models Enabling Materials Discovery Across Multiple Life Skills. In this talk, she will discuss how foundation models can bridge different representations of chemistry from moleculars to device level performance and enable end-to-end discovery of complex battery materials. We will have around 45 minutes for the talk, followed by a Q&A session. Please feel free to submit your questions in the chat during the talk, and we will address them at the end. Okay, with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Sharma. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. Please let me know if my slides are visible.
Yeah, it looks perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who has joined. I'm going to be talking about how foundation models can enable material discovery across multiple length scales, particularly taking an example of electrolyte discovery and highlighting how foundation models can correlate relationships from functional groups in moieties to the battery miles. So let's dive into this. In this talk, my talk is sectioned into four subsections. First, I'm going to give a brief introduction about some background on electrolyte discovery methods, challenges. Then I'm going to dive into the workflow, AI-driven electrolyte discovery workflow, completely how to do multi-scale discovery for this domain, and then dive into foundation models. What is the advancement that foundation models bring to this domain? And lastly, share an example of electrolyte discovery. Now, before I dive into complete presentation, I think it's fit to acknowledge the whole team. This is the IBM team that has worked on battery design and discovery since 2009. But since 2017, they worked on lithium metal-based next generation batteries. I joined this team in 2021, and since then we have focused on electrolyte discovery. Here we have Emilio and Eduardo. They were our collaborators from IBM's Brazil research lab, and they did a tremendous work on development of foundation models that you're going to hear about in this presentation. And also they worked with us to apply these at for electrolyte discovery applications. So let's get started. First is a little background in electrolyte discovery advancements. So I'm sure every person with a little electrochemistry background would be familiar with this information, but I would give this brief introduction for the people who might not be familiar. So in a lithium-ion battery, consists of multiple components: anode, cathode, a separator, and a liquid electrolyte formulation that fills the space between anode and the cathode. And this electrolyte formulation is not just a liquid to separate these two electrodes. It has an important role in the system. It is responsible for transporting ions, lithium ions, between cathode and the anode, and it does that through forming different substructures, solvation shells, aggregates, etc. This electrolyte also interacts with the electrode surfaces to form interfacial layers, which are very important for stabilizing these battery systems, their cycle lives. Electrolyte also reacts on the cathode interface sometimes especially for high voltage batteries, to stabilize cycle lives. Then in certain battery chemistries, we see electrolyte participate in electrochemistry. They are involved in electrochemical reactions. This example that I will share in the next section. So naturally, considering electrolyte plays a very crucial and a complex role in a battery, it's a mixture of multiple constituents. It can be framed by maybe 3 or of up to 10 or 12 molecules. These are salts and solvents in different compositions. So it's a really complex design. And what's surprising is that if you look at lithium-ion battery, most popular electrolyte that is used in commercial batteries till date is the one that was standardized in 1991. So it's been 3 decades, and it's been really challenging to come up with standardized commercial scale new electrolyte designs for these batteries. But now the ongoing focus of electrolyte design discovery for several teams is for next generation batteries. So research teams across the globe are working towards development of next generation batteries that can replace lithium-ion batteries in certain applications. Some examples are aluminum-ion batteries, zinc-ion batteries. We also have lithium metal-based conversion chemistries that have very high specific capacities. So to engineer and develop electrolytes for these new battery chemistries is an open area of research that's continuously in the progress. So before 2015, electrolyte design was discovered or engineered by intuition of scientists who are working in this domain for, let's say, 5-10 years. And based on their experience by monitoring each of these reactions and the roles of electrolyte, they designed each component and formulated an electrolyte formulation. Then around 2015, advancements and adoption of computational methods like screening, simulation took a huge center stage. And this electrolyte discovery was accelerated by big data approach. There was a huge project, Electrolyte Genome, that came out of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where the focus was on creating a huge database of about 1 million and billions of molecules and their relevant properties that are relevant for electrolyte. And then once you have this database, you could do a high throughput screening as shown here based on these properties and shortlist certain candidate materials, salts and solvents for your target battery chemistry. But the challenge remained that once you have these shortlisted components, let's say 8 components, it was still a huge design space based on composition. And the problem still remained a needle in a haystack problem. But this changed since 2023. So 2 advancements we have seen. First is advancement in autonomous labs. This has allowed us to generate a lot of experimental data sets at more multi-scale levels, such as formulations and batteries. Also, with this multi-scale data sets, we have been able to develop AI models that facilitate systematic search of these combinatorial design space by automating design and discovery of battery electrolytes. So ultimately, if we look at this timeline, while initially this process was 10 to 15 years, then with the big data approach, it converged to 2 to 3 years. And now with using the latest technologies, we can come up with a viable electrolyte design maybe in 3 to 4 months. Condition you have this infrastructure ready and set up. So I want to conclude this first introductory section by highlighting that ultimately AI-driven electrolyte design must integrate multi-scale considerations to mirror the depth and nuance of traditional engineering intuition. And when I say multi-scale considerations, what I mean by that is something we will see in the next section of AI-driven electrolyte discovery workflow. Now, electrolyte, as I said, every salt and solvent has certain properties that are of interest that needs to be considered when we are looking at battery systems. And therefore, there is the discovery can be focused on the molecule scale. But also, as I just showed, they also work collectively as a formulation and are responsible for formulation properties like ion transport. And therefore, so their design also has to be considered at a formulation scale or a multi-constituent mixture scale. But also at a third scale is a device level, because these electrolytes are also reacting with anodes and the cathodes in certain battery chemistries. Those considerations must also be taken into place in electrolyte design. So our team worked on advancing electrolyte design strategies through artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning models across each of these multi-scale level. And some of our findings are published in the papers here, but I will also highlight now briefly. So major advancements that came out of our team was how to conceptualize formulations and how to move forward the discovery at formulation scale. So let me briefly walk you through some of our initial results in the pre-foundation model era. Our team was working on lithium iodide battery chemistry, and this was a really promising battery chemistry which could show fast charging within 3 minutes. But it had depreciating cycle life. And so our focus was to find an electrolyte, especially find a solvent mixture that can stabilize this system for longer cycle life. And we went through the conventional conventional process of screening candidate solvents. We extracted a database of solvent candidates that are commercially available and screened them for a bunch of properties, their thermal properties, their HOMO-LUMO levels to identify their stability on the anode lithium metal as well as electrochemical window, and also ensure that they are dissolving the salts of interest. And after all the screening, we had just 4 solvent candidates left at the end. And none of these 4 solvent candidates performed well in our electrolyte. And that left us questioning, what are we doing wrong here? The answer was that we were screening solvent based on its individual properties, whereas we should have looked at it from the perspective of a mixture. And so in 2022, we developed a formulation model to address this design at a formulation scale, where considering each electrolyte has about 4 to 6 components, Each component, each molecule was represented by a graph convolution network, and the molecular descriptor from this graph convolution network was scaled based on their composition. The intuition was if a molecule is present, high in composition, concentration, its influence on the overall performance would be high. And so by this scaling, we could limit the influence of low concentration materials and impart concentration information. Now, the challenge was for the formulations, we only had about 100 data sets for the battery chemistry. And it's really challenging to acquire these data sets in the lab. And this model had a very high dimensional space. So we added some pre-training step where we pre-trained graph neural networks with molecular properties to have a separate step of learning molecular science and then learning a formulation science. So when we adopted this model in our screening, we found results where we were able to identify new electrolyte formulation constituting of a tetraglyme and a small 10% additive amount of this solvent MBDA, which enhanced the cycle life of this battery at a cost of 6% drop in initial capacity that you see here. Interesting, right? So we were a little bumped by capacity drop. And so around the same time, a research team in China came up with idea that in these batteries, if you add lithium chloride in the electrolyte, now this would convert the single electron reaction to a two electron reaction and lead to the formation of ICL. And it would double the theoretical capacity to 422 milliampere hour per gram. And naturally, we and the battery manufacturer client that we were working with, we jumped on this problem and added lithium chloride to this system to see if we can get an improvement in capacity. We did, but that improvement was just 40%, not the 100% that we had expected. And the second challenge was that as you look at this chart, the capacity dropped with increasing cathode active material. Now, to give a little background to folks with non-battery background, battery cathode can be composed of a certain matrix of carbon and host active material, which is the active electrode that participates in the electrode chemistry. So this loading weight or concentration has to be maximized in conventional batteries to have high energy density batteries. But this problem is really challenging, as you can see. So as we maximize this active material percentage, we have capacity drops due to several reasons, but specifically in this battery chemistry, that was the case. So now we wanted to optimize this electrolyte design with respect to a specific cathode loading of interest. And for this, we extended our formulation model to map additional battery design variables alongside formulations. And we not just trained it on about 90 data points that we had covering this whole design space, but we also applied some interpretability approaches to extract electrolyte designs. And once we validated in the lab, we were able to identify electrolyte designs that improved the capacity by about 20%. So these results are shared in the paper published in 2025, Cell Reports Physical Sciences. But there is a takeaway here, and that takeaway is we did this discovery using conventional machine learning models, but we realized several limitations and challenges. The first and the foremost is formulation data sets were expensive to generate and limited. And all of these models had really poor prediction, poor accuracy. You see, root mean square error for most of these models was about 20 to 22 milliampere hour per gram. And for a battery whose maximum capacity is 150, this is a large percentage, right? And the third thing is poor generalization. Most of our discovery that we were doing was really at the edge of the known design. We were improving design by 5%, 10%, 20%, and we were not really finding candidates which were out of distribution, new candidates with significant performance improvements. And this prompted us to look outside the scope of conventional machine learning, deep learning approach. But with these results, I want to highlight that while these conventional approaches were promising for interpolation, they really struggled in true extrapolation that is desired for discovery tasks in material science. And so we looked at foundation models. Now, foundation models started getting developed, being developed in 2017, and we have since then seen a huge portfolio of foundation models. They are large-scale transformer models trained on large corpus of data. They are generalizable models, but they can be adapted to a specific use case with the labeled data sets. In this scope umbrella of foundation models, there is a specific category of chemical foundation models. Now, these chemical foundation models, they are explicitly trained on the textual representation of molecules. An example here is SMILES. SMILES is a textual representation of molecules which, based on predefined rules, shows how atoms are connected within the molecules in a string representation. And the first of the chemical foundation model was Molformer, which was published by IBM team in 2022. This Molformer was an encoder-only model and was trained on about 1 billion of SMILE strings from molecules. And it was shown to perform really well for downstream tasks of molecular property prediction, similarity search, as well as there was a subsequent paper on generation task as well. Now, like every foundation model or every product that is a first generation in its technology, there's always a scope for advancement. And so was the case with the Molformer. The two key things that needed to be advanced in this front was its encoder-only architecture and the training data. So IBM teams collaborated across the globe to look at this problem and advance upon this. And our most up-to-date variant is a semi-TED model, which is now available in an open source GitHub repository, along with the other portfolio of foundation models for materials. And this model was again SMILES based, but it incorporated encoder-decoder framework. And because of this encoder-decoder framework, analysis showed that the latent space of this foundation model was much more composed in comparison to the Molformer. So several experiments were run to understand the composability of structural motifs within the latent space, and we found much organized latent space for this encoder-decoder architecture. And this result has been highlighted in the paper I've mentioned here, so you could probably refer to this. The second thing that they kept in mind in the development of this model was that the 90 million molecules that this model was trained on were the molecules that were known. While you could have a viable string for any number of molecules, and we see that a lot of foundation models are trained with any potential viable chemical string without considering that those molecules might not be realized in literature or in labs yet. But we made sure that these molecules that we used in the pre-training were known molecules, and therefore we did not have any hypothesized molecules in this training set. This foundation model performed really well on all the molecular property prediction and classification benchmarks out there, and it was compared with all the foundation models that was state of the art until the date of the publication, that is 2025. So for more details on this, you should really refer to the study here. Now, this foundation model was trained for molecules, and we wanted to take this and adapt this for electrolyte discovery. And by this point of time, we were curating data sets for electrolyte properties at different length scales, molecule, the formulation, as well as battery device level. And we were fine-tuning these foundation models and using them for downstream prediction, generation, optimization tasks. And we were making sure that any of the validation was supported by experiments. So now this foundation models were always pre-trained with molecular data sets and benchmarked also with molecular properties. But how do we extend this for formulations? So one of our approach that we adopted was to fine-tune these with textual representation of formulation. So because the formulation constitutes of multiple components, you could represent each component separated by its composition, separated by a set token. And such a textual representation we found was effective for these encoder-decoder models to fine-tune them. And we fine-tuned this electrolyte formulation to predict ionic conductivity with about 13,000 electrolytes. And this model was pretty good. It's published in this paper here. It had pretty good accuracies, and we have compared the performance of this model with other approaches in literature to predict ionic conductivity. Now, let me give you a brief background. These studies that are described here in the small markers are the ones where components were fixed and only compositions were varied. So this should give you an idea that AI studies or machine learning on this formulation designs were really constrained to cases where components were kept fixed and only compositions were varied. Now, this type of formulation approaches allowed us to create AI models which map large chemical design space. And in comparison to the comparative chemical design space that is that is shown by the size of the marker, indicated by the size of marker here, this approach, this foundation model driven approach really had good prediction accuracies as well as good R-square. And we use it for the discovery task that I'm going to talk about in the next section. But we also realized that could there be a better way of representing formulations? Because there is not an intuitive way how compositions are affecting the component here. And so we took foundation models and we used them in manner similar to the graph convolution networks, where we extracted molecular embeddings from these foundation models and then trained a downstream machine learning or deep learning model to map them to macroscopic outcomes. And with just this difference in approach, there was a 6.2x times improvement in prediction. The RMSE improved. This process was much more robust because when we were fine-tuning the whole foundation model, we are fine-tuning millions of parameters. And this process here is way robust, requires more parameter optimization. And major reason why we found this better in terms was that by retaining SemiTed's original learning of mapping chemical functional groups in the space of molecules, we were able to retain the importance of these functional groups in the macroscopic formulation levels. Now, a little background again here. During the training of SemiTed, we have SMILE strings, and these were tokenized. So when they are tokenized, we have these small tokens that are analogous to chemical functional groups or chemical moieties. And therefore, during the pre-training, SemiTed-like models, they learn how these chemical moieties are related to molecules and in the structural space. Whereas when we dissolve these molecules in a formulation, these moieties get broken into, again, to the subgroups, and they then interact differently for impacting the macroscopic outcomes like ion transport, as you can see here. So therefore, it's really important that these substructures are resolved in the foundation model representation. And this point would also be highlighted in some results that we see in the next slides. So for our overall developing a portfolio of models at multiple length scale, we use this approach where we used foundation models to extract molecular embeddings, and we aggregated them into system representation based on their compositions, as you can see for the formulation case. But if there were additional design variables in the data set, such as separator, temperature, or a cathode loading, they were also incorporated along with this formulation descriptors as a training input. And we compared this SMILES-based foundation model with other foundation models that are state of the art, including MOLTI-5. MOLTI-5 is trained with 100 million SMILES and about 30,000 textual description that define how molecules and their functional groups are related to the property of the molecule. Then we have GraphMP, which uses 2D and 3D graph representation of molecules as a pre-training modality. And then another foundation model that we used for this analysis was Galactica. It's a LLM for science, and it has a wide array of data used in the pre-training. It has SMILE strings, it has DNA sequences, it has literature, text, code, and so forth. So pretty interesting comparative analysis. And we trained a portfolio of battery data sets at a molecular level. That means the molecular properties that are of interest: HUMO-LUMO, oxidation, reduction potential, formulation data sets like ionic conductivity, which we curated from literature. But we internally also generated an additional data set on the contact angle. Now, contact angle is with the separator. So what is the contact angle that electrolyte formulation makes with the separator decides the the wettability of the electrolyte and the separator, and helps us decide how permeable the electrolyte would be with the separator. And so that's one of the consideration. We also curated a solubility data set in our lab through automated experimentation. And we use this data set to really classify which of these electrolytes would be miscible and non-miscible. Now, this is an important criteria, especially for industrial scale electrolyte development, because a clear miscible electrolyte is more suitable for manufacturability. And lastly, how we can predict device performance based on bad electrolytes and other design variables. So we used the two baseline data sets of logarithmic Coulombic efficiency that was first shared by Professor Ichui in his group from the Stanford, and a capacity data set that we used from our lithium iodide battery chemistry. Now, we had some interesting results. We also compared results from the foundation models with Morgan fingerprints, which are very basic functional, based on functional groups fingerprints, and you can generate them using RDKit library from the Python. And our interesting results showed that for two of these data sets where we had large data, ionic conductivity and solubility, we had 18,000 data sets for ionic conductivity and about 3,000 data sets for solubility. Morgan fingerprints outperformed all foundation models. Now, that is a result that all the organizations who are spending millions of dollars in developing, pre-training these foundation models don't want to see. A very conventional baseline fingerprint could outperform these foundation models for these macroscopic property prediction. And it's surprising that this result went unnoticed when the foundation models were being developed. And that's likely because during the development of all these foundation models, they are benchmarked with just the molecular properties, right? We have a QM9 data set, toxicity data set, a bunch of baselines have been created for molecular properties, but their effect or they are not benchmarked for the properties that are more at the level of mixtures or formulations. And this here highlights why how Morgan fingerprints can outperform all the foundation models. But then for the small data regimes, that means when the data sets were within few hundreds, we had foundation models really outperforming the Morgan fingerprints. Particularly, SMILES-based foundation models were much better for the application that we are discussing here. In the case of molecular properties, semi-TED outperformed all models. In the case of formulations, we had MOLTI-5 showing the best performance next to Morgan fingerprints here. Same was the case for the solubility. And for the battery performance, SemiTed and Multi5 had comparative performance. Now, both SemiTed and Multi5 were primarily SMILES based, being trained on 90 million and 100 million SMILES molecular data sets. But Multi5 had something additional. It also had textual descriptions that have a semantic, that establish semantic relationship between functional groups and to the molecule properties or their behavior. And this information was really helpful. Now, this highlights how modalities, pre-training modalities, are important for downstream tasks, especially when we are looking at multi-scale property prediction. An important observation here is that graph-based foundation models really performed poorly. And so let me describe why that is. Because formulation performance is dictated by hierarchical interactions between chemical moieties, like I just showed, and ion aggregates, solvation structures. It's very important that model has ability to resolve final substructures such as moieties and their dependencies. A graph-based foundation models, a graph has a rigid representation, 2D, 3D representation of a whole molecule structure, and it lacks the ability to resolve this representation into finer substructural systems. So this is really important to understand and decide which foundation models are suitable for downstream applications. We also evaluated their out of distribution performance, first based on their output distributions, tail end performance data sets. Here we show that we consistently SemiTed or SMILES-based foundation models outperformed other foundation models with low uncertainties, including the Morgan fingerprints. And we also tried to quantify the out of distribution based on inputs, that means chemicals and composition. And we did that by calculating the distance between chemical similarity or the distance between the test data and from the training data that was used to train the model. And this quantification is shown here as closeness to the training data and is mapped against the predicted errors. And this trend is pretty also intuitive, confirming that further your test data is from the model's training data, your errors, prediction errors are going to be higher. But this approach also helps you evaluate reliability of the model when you are extrapolating to an unexplored region. So what is the maximum uncertainty that you would like in your prediction is evaluation that this provides. So closing out this section with a key message that foundation models are particularly useful in low data regimes, and we found they were not useful when we had large data sets, especially depicting mixture macroscopic properties. And pre-training modalities have strong influence on model performance on downstream tasks. And I want to leave this audience with this image in the mind that latent space of foundation models that are based on SMILES is useful to correlate these chemical moieties to the macroscopic outcomes. And it is really useful in the multi-scale learning. So with this, coming to the last section of can foundation models enable scientific discovery that is out of distribution? What I've shared so far is our multi-scale electrolyte discovery workflow, its limitations, and what is the scope of foundation models in predicting these multi-scale properties. And in this last example study, I would like to show you how we used two of these models to identify new electrolytes that have high ionic conductivity at room temperature, and they were particularly out of distribution. I've shared ionic conductivity prediction model just in the previous section, but I want to highlight that this model, again, had a wide array of salts and the solvents in its training space. But most importantly, you would look at this chart here, which compares how many data points fell within the different ionic conductivity performance regions. And in this region where there is a star, this is a ionic conductivity between 10 and above of 15 is what's acceptable for commercial lithium-ion batteries. And in this huge data set curated from literature, only a handful of electrolytes fall within this target performance space. So we use this fine-tuned model that we shared before, really excellent in predicting, with further improvements possible, but still excellent, alongside a solubility assessment model. So this solubility data set was again curated in our lab through high throughput experimentation, and it has an array, a large diversity of salts. It had a data set of 3,000 formulations constituting of single salt, single solvent, multi-salt solvent formulations, and the foundation models were fine-tuned to classify electrolyte as either soluble or insoluble. This model was correct 96% of the times, but its out of distribution analysis was still questionable. I have to point that out here. Now, with these two models, we targeted new electrolyte designs. So we generated about 100,000 formulations that contained diverse salts. These out of design electrolyte formulation designs are mapped here in this UMAP. This blue chunk is those 1,000, and the green here is the literature data set. So you can see the design space is how huge it is and how varied it is in comparison to the literature data set. And we predicted ionic conductivity for these electrolyte formulations, new electrolyte formulations. Out of these, the ones that fall in the high ionic conductivity region are highlighted here. And these can also be classified based on the salts, the primary salts that are present in these formulations. And what you see is that LiPF6, LiASF6, naturally these salt-based solvents formulations have high ionic conductivity. But we also see some formulations over here that are based on LiDFOB that have high ionic conductivity, some based on LiFSI. So we took this whole, shortlisted electrolyte formulations with high ionic conductivity and further screened them for solubility and isolated the formulation candidates that were soluble. Once we had those shortlisted candidates, we then took them to the lab for experimental validation, and we validated based on different salt candidates, primary salt candidates. And here are the results comparing the formulation based on a salt along with its best ionic conductivity and formulation that is generated in this study with the improvement in the ionic conductivity generated here. And you would see that we were able to bring about improvement about 82% with this new electrolyte design for LiFSI-based electrolyte formulation. For LiPF6, though LiPF6 electrolytes already have high ionic conductivity, and we were still able to realize new formulation, new solvent designs that can match this performance. And especially for LiDFOB, which has low ionic conductivity in literature, we were able to improve ionic conductivity by 170% with this new formulation design. And important thing is, LiDFOB is a salt that is of interest for low temperature batteries. And our new electrolyte formulation design also constituted of a solvent based on lactone that is also realized in certain literature to be useful for low temperature batteries. So really, we were able to come up with new electrolyte formulation designs with this, but also this chart here shows, again, compares the percentage of electrolytes that were and the range that they were present in the literature, along with the validated electrolytes that we validated in the lab. And you would see that about 44% of the electrolytes, they were above the threshold, the target threshold of ionic conductivity that's accepted in the commercial systems. And we were able to improve and identify a large chunk of formulations with high performance. So these were really inspiring results and highlighting how foundation models can improve the chances of breakthrough discovery, especially with their extrapolation capabilities. But that definitely comes with a consideration that we still have to consider what is the scope of their out of distribution, what is the scope for them for out of distribution prediction still. Because again, we just had 44% validation success. That's right. So with this, I want to conclude my talk with, and this here highlighted some key conclusions from all the 4 sections. AI-driven workflows must integrate multi-scale considerations for the electrolyte discovery, and we shared how this electrolyte multi-scale can be incorporated for electrolyte discovery, but conventional machine learning approaches still struggle in true extrapolation that is required for discovery task. Then I talked about foundation models and importance of pre-training modalities for predicting these macroscopic outcomes in the formulation applications. And this is an image that I want everybody who's attending this seminar to remember, because this is really important and might help in your if you're working on the similar application. And lastly, foundation models. I shared how foundation models improved our chances of breakthrough discovery by their promising extrapolation capabilities. So with this, I would stop here. Thank you, everyone who's participated here, and I'd be happy to take any further questions.
Great. Thank you again, Dr. Sharma, for the great talk. We'll now move on to the Q&A session. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or type your questions in the chat, and I will call on you to speak. And I think we have the 2 questions from James. James, I have unmuted you, and you can ask questions.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this talk. It's very exciting and interesting to see. I guess my first quick question was about this data set of the 13,000 electrolyte conductivity. Was that created by IBM, or how did you curate such a data set?
That was a data set that was curated from literature. And there's a study, there is a paper in Scientific Data, where about 13,000 electrolyte formulations they had curated, and an analytical study for this was put together, and we took from there. In the follow-up study, we extended it to 18,000 by collecting more data from published literature.
So basically scraping previously published values.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the other question I had was about extending your current workflow. I'm wondering if you've thought about the transference number, not only the ion conductivity, and if that's something that you think can be possible to predict with some of these foundation model approaches.
That is a very good question. We have definitely thought about transference number, though we found data sets to be lacking. Also, so if we don't have sufficient data, it's hard to evaluate what AI approaches can be suitable on that front. So I think, to the best of my understanding, at this moment, simulation as well as intuitive driven studies remain the best source for the transference number until we have more data being shared, or at least being shared in the open source literature. I would like to add on, if you are familiar with any such study, please, I would be happy to discuss this. Please feel free to share. You can reach out to me, and we can discuss that further.
Thank you. And we also have a question from Soxeha. Yeah, I have unmuted you, and you can ask questions.
Okay. Hi. Thanks very much for this very interesting talk. I have a question regarding the comparison that you show. I think, like, I don't remember the slide, probably like 28, 29 or so, where you compare the foundational model with the Morgan fingerprint for ionic conductivity and solubility.
Yes.
I was wondering if you also compare with the model that are trained specifically for those tasks, and how it is compared to this foundational model and Morgan fingerprint.
Can you clarify what do you mean by models that are trained specifically
So, for example,
this
you know,
task?
like
Yes.
I think like you have one slide that shows somehow this like model from literature. For example, like Chibushi's group at the University of Chicago, he trained like model for ionic conductivity. You have also like people from ByteDance who also have trained model that are target specifically for like ionic conductivity and like
Right.
one particular property. And so I wonder like if those models outperform or underperform compared to this foundational model and Morgan fingerprint.
That's a good question. For ionic conductivity, definitely we have compared with these literature models, and foundation models have outperformed these approaches. But the Morgan fingerprints, here you see that Morgan fingerprint result outperformed even the foundation model in this case, right? And this is because how I incorporated Morgan fingerprints was creating Morgan fingerprints for each molecule, and then doing a bit of feature engineering for formulations by scaling and adding. And maybe it's not the approach that has been tested in conventional literature, but by featurizing formulation through Morgan fingerprints such way, and training isolated, not a foundation model, isolated downstream machine learning model, this Morgan fingerprint was still outperforming any foundation model. But just comparing results from other literature, definitely they were, we found them worse than the results that are shown here.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, actually, I also want to ask a question. Yeah. My question is, do you think is it possible to transfer our models trained on lithium-based batteries across different chemistries? For example, from lithium-ion battery to sodium-ion battery or beyond?
That's a good question. Some of these models, like from the molecule to manufacturability, these type of models are pretty generalizable and can be used for electrolyte discovery across different battery chemistries. But for particularly device performance, training device performance, I have found it really challenging to mix different data sets coming from different battery chemistries at this point. I've tried with even slightest variations in anode cathode compositions. Especially for the electrolyte formulation case, the data set requirement exceeds thousands of data points. And I've tried to curate such large data sets, but I've still not been able to achieve that. That is cross chemistry transfer. With that, I would still say that you could still integrate if the chemistries are related, such as the case I showed you, a lithium iodide, and then with lithium chloride, you could convert it to two-electron chemistry. So these are related chemistries, but slightly different conversion mechanisms, right? So for these type of approaches, you could incorporate some interpretability or explainability approaches to extract electrolyte designs. But completely relying on prediction models is not something that I have been successful at.
Got it. Thank you. And do you think the foundation models are truly learning some chemical principles, or they just capture the statistical correlations?
That's a good question. They are learning chemical correlations, at least from based on the foundation model analysis that we have done, especially for the semi-TED, as we investigated their latent space, as well as we have benchmarked them for several of these downstream tasks. So definitely their learning is not just based on statistical principles. We have shown and ensured that they are learning chemical correlations very soundly. And I think I can pinpoint you to the paper where this could be highlighted in a more better nuance. It's this one.
Okay. Thank you. And we also have a question from Ali. Yeah. You can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, hi, Vidushi. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I assume that those multi-scale predictions are based on gas and dissolved phases. I'm just wondering how those foundation models behave in crystalline and solid phases.
That's a good question. For this application, we have only taken application of liquid formulations. At least that has been the focus of our team. Unfortunately, I don't have that expertise on the solid state foundation models and their downstream tasks. So maybe I'm not the best person. I apologize to give you a
I
very good
see.
answer. Yeah,
But you don't know if there is some existing research or
there
anything
is.
published.
There
Okay.
is.
So
There,
they work in
yes. Okay, so the foundation models for solid state materials are slightly different than these foundation models that are trained with molecular data sets. These foundation models for solid state, they are usually go by foundation models for crystals. If I recall, they are trained with the crystal data sets from Materials Project and other crystal databases. So there is a portfolio of solid state foundation models, but they are different from these ones. And they are also, to the best of my knowledge, based on graph, equivariant graph representations. Whereas the foundation models that I discussed here were based on smiles. Also, some of them were graph-based. So there are models there, yes. But I think to study their outcomes at a macroscopic level, that means when you have heterostructures or like systems, like even in batteries, you have some electrodes that constitute of multiple components, composites. I don't think those type of studies have been done. So literature is really lacking on that front.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are at time, so we'll wrap up the Q&A here. Thank you again for all the great questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma, for the insightful and inspiring talk. We really appreciate you sharing your perspective on foundation models and how they can involve material discovery across multiple land skills. And thanks to everyone for joining us today, especially those connecting from different time zones. We look forward to continue these discussions in our upcoming seminars. Thank you all again, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
I have some validation. Still 12.